Hey, what's happening everybody? It's Adam here from GIS Express. Welcome back to our channel. And in today's video, we're going to be delving into the quite powerful pull data functions available to you within ArcGIS Survey123 Connect. I'm hoping that by the end of this video tutorial, you're going to be familiar with how you can pull data from existing feature layers in ArcGIS Online. Now, where do we start off with such a, this topic can get a little bit complex. So where do we start off? Well, let's start off with what pull data functions are within Survey123. And they're essentially these little code snippets or these tools that allow us to retrieve information from external sources. And these external sources could be feature layers. And feature layers, it doesn't really matter. They could be feature layers owned by you. They could be feature layers shared with your organizations that you have access to. Or they could even be publicly available feature layers, which is what we'll be doing in today's video. Feature layers from Esri's Living Atlas. Or they could indeed, your external source could be a CSV file as well. But we're going to be dealing with feature layers today. And these pull data functions can be invaluable when it comes to certain project workflows because they really help to avoid or even minimize manual data entry from your end users. They ensure consistent and accurate data is collected across Survey123 forms, and they also allow for dynamic survey adjustments based on existing data sets. Now, a few common uses that you might come across pull data functions in your day-to-day job would be if you ever need to auto-populate fields based on a user input, if you ever need to adjust question visibility or choices based on existing data sets, and indeed if you even need to validate user inputs against a set list or even a range from an external source. And those external sources could be feature layers or CSV files. So with that being said, let's dive into today's video tutorial. I have two feature layers that are available from Esri's Living Atlas, and we're going to be dealing with our first feature layer, which is going to be Geolytics Retail Points 2023 Q1, which is when this video is recorded. And I'm going to be dealing with United Kingdom postcode area boundaries. Now, I won't open these up, but we can assume postcode area boundaries is going to be a polygon, and our retail points are going to be points, right? So I'm going to pull data from a point feature layer and a polygon feature layer. Now, as we can see here, the very first thing when we want to pull data from an external source, such as a feature layer, we first need to know two things. We need to know, well, what is the URL, right, of the REST URL of this feature layer? And the second thing we need to know is what attribute names we're going to pull from. So to get started, you're going to go to layers, right? So it's not just enough whatever appears in this URL, it's not what we want. And in this URL, that's not what we want either. It's very important that before we start to get into pull data functions, that we actually navigate to the REST endpoint, the exact REST endpoint of this feature layer. And, one common assumption is, oh, I just go down here and I can copy this. Well, actually, we need to click on layers and we need to copy this URL. Now, usually, it's only a slash and a 0 or a slash and a 1. That's the difference. But we do need to be, when we are dealing with code snippets, right, which we are when we're talking about pull data functions, we do need to be very exact about it, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this into my Notion page that I have set up. Of course, Notion isn't necessary for this video, but I'm going to copy that exact URL REST endpoint. The second thing I'm going to do then is go to data here. And data doesn't really matter where you're getting it from. The same attribute table in this case is going to be the exact same attribute table I hit when I go to data here as well. Now, you might think, hey, look, I have a decent amount of information in this attribute table, right? I have addresses, I have eastings, I have latitude and longitude and northings and postcodes and all sorts, right? I have retailers and store names. Now, the most important thing is, when we are using pull data functions, we do need to get the exact field name. So if we even look here, and let's go across to say latitude, right? I can see here it says it's all lowercase latitude, but actually when I'm doing pull data functions for any kind of projects that I'm working on, I always go into fields, because whatever your field name is, it could be different to the alias. So we see in this case for longitude, for example, longitude, the field alias itself is all lowercase longitude. But the actual field name that we need to put for our pull data function to work is actually something else completely different, right? So it's long_WGS, and that's the actual thing that we want to copy across. Yeah. So when I go in, I'll open up my Notion page again, and I'm just going to copy in my fields that I want. So I want longitude, latitude, and having a look here, I might want address line 1. So that's my first address. And I'm going to use retailer maybe in this data set, and then store name, say, right? So the first step is to identify the URL. The second step then is to identify the exact field names for each, right? And then we repeat for the postcodes, right? So I want to pull from multiple different feature layers. Of course, if you just want to pull data from one feature layer, stop right now, right? And you've covered your first 2 steps. But let's go back over it again. Very first thing I do, I navigate to the item details page. Remember, it's not this URL that I want. It's hidden within layers. And normally, like I said, the only difference between these URLs is it's the exact REST endpoint of this data set. And I can see here it's a polygon layer. And normally it's only like a slash and a 0 or slash and a 1, like I said. But this is the exact URL I want to copy. I'm going to open up my Notion page, which again, it's not necessary. If you don't have Notion, use Microsoft Word, use whatever you want. But you can see here, right? If I had a selected postcode and I had said, oh, it's going to be HTTPS services.arcgis.com, grand, and then I have like the unique item ID and then feature server, but I'm missing that tree, my pull data function is not going to work. So just to be doubly clear on that, if I copy this URL found on the item details page and I go into Notion and I paste that in, you can see it stops at feature servers. This is no good for my pull data function. This is what I want here. I want the exact URL REST endpoint. So I don't need that. It's just a very important note. Hey, why isn't my pull data function working? Maybe it's because you don't have the exact REST URL of the feature layer that you're trying to pull data from. Yeah. So once I have the exact URL, I can go in here. I can say data. And you can see here, it's a very basic data set, right? I have ID, name, total population, area in square kilometers. So the only ones that I really want, maybe I'll just take these 3 fields: name, total population, and area. And it is as simple as copy and paste. Copy. So I'm pressing Control C, Control V, Control C, Control V. So now we have our 2 URLs of the 2 feature layers that we want to pull data from, and we have our field names. Perfect. Now what I want to do is I want to open up my Survey123 Connect. And I'm going to open up my XLS form here. Now, today's video tutorial, we're starting from scratch. This is not coming to you and being like, hey, this is something I prepared earlier, right? We're going to build this and test it from scratch. Hopefully you appreciate it. Might be a bit of a long video, but sure, look, if you're 10 minutes in, thanks for sticking with me, you know. But let's go ahead and open up our XLS form. Completely blank. You can see survey choices. I don't have anything in it. I've zoomed in just so you guys can see my screen more clearly. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my Notion page and I'm going to say, okay, so my geolytics retail points is a point feature layer, and I want to get latitude, longitude, and I'm going to use that to plot the point on the map. Address line 1 could be a good one to pull data from, right? So we always need something in our Survey123 form that's going to kick off this pull data function, okay? So if I type in address 1, then I'm going to use that to pre-populate all the different information, right? So you can see how this would work for a feature layer, for instance, if you had unique codes, you know. So if you had, oh, hey, I'm at such and such a street, here's the postcode, or here's the street name address. Once the user types in that address or selects it from a drop-down menu, then we're going to use that to fire off these pull data functions. And just from looking at this here, I think this address line 1 could be a very good one to start our pull data function. So you always need to do something that's going to fire it off. So, and I think add _1, all lowercase, is the field we're going to go for. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to type, and let's just say text. I'm going to keep it the same. I do like whatever field name, and again, this isn't, there's no right way to do this, but if I wanted to say add _1, that's the exact same field name I'm looking for, which, you know, does benefit that it's the exact same field name and all the data that goes into this is the exact same field name, just if you ever need to troubleshoot things, you know. And I'm going to call it add 1, and then I'm going to say, okay, enter an address to pull data, right? And this is your label that you're going to say to your end user. You might be able to give them a hint, stuff like that, but we just want to focus on pull data functions. For now. So they're going to enter in a piece of text. Doesn't have to be much. And then we're going to use this to fire off our pull data function. Now, if we just use text at the start just to show what it's actually going to be like, the very next thing I want to do is I want to say, well, okay, I'm going to use text, input an address, and I want that to return the latitude and longitude to plot it on a map. So I need 3 extra rows here, right? So I need one that's going to be a decimal, another one that's going to be a decimal, and then I need a geopoint. So I'm saying here that based on the input in row 2, my address line 1, I want you to populate the longitude and the latitude. And I'm going to use the longitude and latitude from geolytics retail points to plot a unique point on my map in my Survey123 form. And I'm going to call this my unique point. Yeah? I'll just call it point. Now, my label, I'm going to say longitude. Remember, if you ever want to stump a GIS person, ask them which is X and which is Y, longitude or latitude. and see them sweat. I'm going to say this is latitude and this is Y. So your latitude is along Y-axis, longitude is along X-axis. And then I'm going to say location of, and a handy tip as well, if you ever want to like give your map a dynamic name, you can do that, right? Just by calling in the actual name field here. So if I want to say location of, and I say US dollars, add 1, that's actually going to say location of, and then whatever the user puts into this cell B2 is going to populate here, right? So I say location of B2, and it's going to populate whatever they put in the address field. Now, when we are dealing with pull data functions, I'm going to skip, like guidance hint, appearance required. We can of course do all that, but I want to go across to read only, right? So I do like to make these things read only if I can. So the map question, right? Because if we are, the whole point of pulling data in from an external source is to aid, and minimize manual user input, right? So if we are minimizing manual user input, and manual user input can lead to mistakes, right? So we kind of just want to make sure, like, if we are pulling data, hey, ask yourself the question, should this be read-only? And in this case, if I'm saying, I don't want my users to plot a point on a map, I want to do that for them, and all they have to do is enter an address, and then the point pops on the map. I just want to make everything read-only, and that's fine, But do ask yourself the question, anytime we're using pull data functions, if it's coming from an authoritative external source, like a feature layer or a CSV, then, ask yourself the question, can this be read-only? And if it can, hey, go for it, yeah? But now we get to the actual pull data functions. All your pull data functions are going to exist in this calculation column here. So the first one I have up is longitude. Now, what I need for this, all your pull data functions are going to be the same. They're going to start off pull data, all lowercase, open brackets, quotation marks, at layer. Now this is from pulling from a feature layer, remember? Close quotation marks. We're going to put in a comma. And this, what we're doing right now, is uniform across the board, right? It doesn't matter if you put in a space, that's fine. But what I want to say is, I'm going to pull data at layer, and I'm going to say get value. This is all uniform. This doesn't change. If you're doing this, I'm doing this, we're all writing the same characters to get to what we want. Open quotation marks, attributes. So I'm calling in the attribute table. Full stop. Now it changes, right? So now, pull data, open my brackets, and I said, I'm going to pull data from a layer. What I want to do is I want to get a value. This is my operator. I put in a comma, I open quotation marks, and I say, I want you to get value from attributes. We go back to our trusty Notion pad or text pad or our Microsoft Word document, whatever you're using, and I say longitude is long underscore WGS. Copy this. Paste it in there. Close your quotation marks. The next thing I want to do is I want to put in a comma again, space. Quotation marks. The one, I don't know what the inverted comma, right? Inverted comma. From here I go back to my Notion. This is the REST URL point. So I copy this across, Control C, Control V. So pulled in the actual REST URL, the exact REST URL of the feature layer I want to pull from. Inverted comma again, comma. To get this, so it's going to pull longitude, put it into my longitude field in my Survey123 form. I've identified the exact rest URL. I identified the exact field name, the attribute that I want from the layer. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate or construct a where clause. And a where clause means that whatever is put into this particular text field, I want you to almost create a lookup between what my end user has entered in this name field and what's in the actual attribute table. And once you find it, I want you to return it and put it on the map. But this is essentially my join. Yeah? And to do a join, I'm just going to use a function within Excel or pull data functions, right? To say concat, open brackets, quotation marks, and this is the reason why I like to say my fields are always the same, right? So add_1 is the exact same field that's in this geolytics feature layer that I'm trying to pull from, add_1. So that means when I go in, you specify the exact field name of what's in your feature layer. And we say space equals. And we say inverted comma, quotation marks, comma. Now I say what's in my survey form. $, curly brackets, add_1, comma. And now I have to close this whole thing out. And how I close this whole thing out? Is by comma, quotation marks, inverted comma, quotation marks, close bracket, right? So you're just keeping track of everything that you've put brackets around. So you'll notice here they've put in, and you're just trying to close off everything that you see here. And then when I concatenate, I'm constructing a where clause. So it's saying that, hey, whatever you've added in to this field in your survey form, I want you to look up. I'm going to pull data from a layer. I'm going to get a particular value. This is the field name you need to search. This is the exact rest URL of the feature layer, where it's hosted. And what I want you to do is concatenate, so construct a where clause where my field in my feature layer equals the field that I've put in my Survey123 form. Now, if that changes, right? So if I say, look, my name of my particular field, I don't really want that. I want add_1. Well, then my pull data function changes for anything that's in this square, these curly brackets. Yeah. So $, needs to be add_1. But what I do like about keeping them uniform is that I can say, you know, okay, my where clause is add1 equals add1. Okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah. The beautiful thing about this is that, look, I will put something like this in the description of this video so you can just copy and paste it into your own Survey123 forms. But the idea is that once I have it constructed, I can just copy and paste that in. Because it's set, there's a unique code between the two, my Survey123 form and the feature layer I'm trying to pull from now, in add1 equals add1. I can now go back to my Notion tab or my text or whatever and say, okay, so to pull latitude is LAT_WGS. Grand. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to navigate to where I have long_WGS, press paste, and I'm good to go. Now all I have to do in order to get this onto the map, so I've pulled data, to place it onto the actual map, I'm going to do a separate calculation for my geopoint, and I'm going to say concat. So again, same thing I've been doing when I've constructed a where clause. I'm going to say concat. I need to make sure that these are numbers, right? So even if it is a string in the external source, like the feature layer, I need to make sure it's in numbers. So I just put in number. So concat adds the two together as text fields. I open a bracket. I say number. Open another bracket. And that's why it's very confusing at the end. A lot of pulldata functions would fail at the end because we don't close them out correctly. So we need to keep track of how many quotation marks, how many inverted commas we use. Yeah, and that's one annoying thing about it. But once we do keep track of it, it is quite a powerful function. And so I want to say, okay, I'm going to construct this now, and I'm going to say go longitude, end curly brackets, close normal brackets, comma, inverted comma, space, to make sure that the longitude isn't confused with the latitude. And I'm going to put in a separate comma to say number, open normal brackets, $, curly brackets, and then say latitude. Close curly brackets, close normal brackets, and then we need to close normal brackets again. So just make sure that everything's closed out. If you start something, close it out at the end. The thing here is that, so I'm saying I'm going to enter an address. It's going to pull back for me the longitude. It's going to pull back for me the latitude. And then it's going to concatenate onto the actual geopoint question whatever these two values are. And what I'm saying here is that make sure they're both numbers, just in case it comes in as a string. It's best practice to keep these as numbers. Put a space in between so it's readable by the Survey123 form, and just concatenate them together and see if we have a point. Now, let's save this. So a lot of my testing is going to be done in Survey123 Connect. So, in order to test this then, I'm going to go back to my Geolytics attribute drive, right? So I can see add1 is the text that we're going to use to fire off. Of course, it's probably better. I mean, you got your own unique IDs in your data, you got your own postcode, stuff like that. But we can easily just apply it as a string as well. So I have one here called West Hill Drive. So let's just type that in to our survey form. So it's loaded up there. I said enter an address to pull data. So let's go West Hill. It was a space drive, hit enter. And you can see that it's pulled data. Perfect. Okay, so 57.15 latitude -2. Okay. Now let's go Wytham Terrace. Let's go back and check this. So that's the third one here. So Wytham space Terrace. Wytham Terrace. It changes again. Nice one. Now let's try, let's believe in the power of 3, right? So we were in Aberdeenshire. And let's go Nottingham Road and just see if it returns anything, just to test it out. A lot of your stuff is always going to be in testing again. Perfect. So that's worked. Longitude, latitude, put them together, and we're good to go. Now, there's other fields in here that I can pull from, right? So, like I said, the beautiful thing, probably the hardest part is to get the map question working. So you can see that that's a read-only map. In reality, if you have like pulldata functions, you can make all these hidden as well, right? So we don't need to show it. I'm just showing you how to construct it today. But you don't actually need to have these points visible, right? Like it's perfectly possible that we don't say longitude and latitude. We just show the map. But for now, we can say, okay, there's a few more fields that I want to pull from. So I have retailer and store name here. So what I can do is say, I'm just going to put in a text field. I'm going to call it store name retailer. And this is coming directly from the retail points, right, that we had. So I go in fields, retailer, store name. Go back to so my label is going to be store name. My label on retailer should be retailer, if I could spell correctly. And now, exact same thing again. I can copy the calculation into the calculation field of store name, and then all I have to do is edit this. So previously was long underscore WGS, now it's going to be store underscore name, and I just double check it in Notion, in my Notion, or I can check it directly in the field, right? So retailer is going to just be retailer, all lowercase. And again, to get this working for retailer, copy, paste. Once it's set up that it's pulling from the exact same feature layer, no problem, just copy and paste. Retailer. Then I just want to make sure that these are yeses as well. Yeah. Now you might say as well, if I am doing this, well, why isn't it a note? And my experience with notes being a bit iffy, particularly if you have workflows that require Survey123 mobile and also to be filled in a browser. So for example, I might have in a consultancy workflow where I have the option of submitting Survey123 forms via the mobile app, and also I have it embedded in a dashboard, and it just depends where people are, where they're filling out those survey forms. I've always found the decimals stick with the longitude and latitude. The text fields stick as text. If I need integers, they stick as integers. My experience with notes has been it's converted it to string, even when it's not specified, right, as a decimal or an integer, right? Notes are good for if your attributes are in text. If they're strings, cool enough. Go for notes, or text. It's fine. It just shows up as a text field, like we'll see here, right? Shows up looking kind of like a note, So if I go back in here now, so I have West Hill space drive, and you can see that that's pulled data. So it said store name Aldi, West Hill retailer is Aldi. Perfect. So now we're pulling data. What happens if I want to say, right, well, you know what? I have this point. I want to find out more information about it, right? So I want to say where you have this point, what postcode boundary is it in? What's the name of the postcode boundary? And we can do that. And we can use our existing pull functions, right? So we're moving on to the second feature layer now. And really what it comes down to is we can pull data, and if what we've entered in the text field matches with what we have in our external source feature layer, we get a result. Perfect. But what if I want to take this to the next level geographically speaking, right? So geographically speaking, I want to say, well, I've plotted a point on a map using latitude and longitude values from a feature layer. Now what I actually want to do is I want to intersect that point. I want to find out spatially where that point is located, and what I want to do now is get more information. So if this point intersects a polygon feature layer, I want to get information, attribute information from that polygon layer. What do I do, right? So our pull data function is good. So use this pull data function if you want to get attribute information. So if your value in your text field or your choice list matches this, then return the value. If you want to use spatial data functions, it's just a slightly different, right? In the sense that I come in here to my calculation, so I'm going to say that this is text, and we want to say our polygon feature layer, if you remember, is postcode district, yeah? So I want to say postcode district name is going to be my label, and my pull data function is going to start off the exact same, so I say pull data all lowercase, and that's fine, right? When we're using pull data functions, it's going to be the exact same. It's going to be the exact same for the layer, so I open up my brackets, I open up quotation marks, get the little @ symbol in there, close quotation marks after layer. Perfect. Put in my comma, space, open quotation marks, get value with a capital V, all going to be the same, except when I'm using spatial functions, right, within pull data, what I'm going to have to say is get value at, right? So when I'm saying get value at, so when I get value, it's attribute to attribute. Whatever your text string is in here, or your code, or whatever you're putting in your first row here to kick off the pull data function, hey, if you match it in this feature layer, return some attribute information. What I'm saying now though is get value at, so I'm going to pass the geopoint question into this and start pulling out data from there, right? So same thing again, comma, attributes, dot, and then I go back into my Notion and I say, what's the postcode name? Is just name, all uppercase. So I just say name. I'm gonna close my quotation marks here, comma, open quotation marks, and now I go back into my Notion page that has the exact REST URL of this feature layer. I'm going to copy that in here, close quotation marks, comma, and now before I was concatenating two values, I was concatenating longitude with latitude and using it then to plot it on the geopoint. I don't actually need to do that now. All I need to do is $, curly brackets, and say point to close it off, and then just close brackets. So it's actually easier to pull data spatially because we don't need to construct. We don't have that extra work of constructing a where clause in it. Yeah, so where I'm concatenating and saying, hey, the field in the feature layer must equal whatever my user enters in this particular field in my survey form. I don't need to do that because once I have the point on the map, I can then use it and say, hey, where you intersect this polygon feature layer, return information from me, and what I'm going to do is postcode district name. We'll save that. And now I'm going to go back to my Survey123 form. I'm going to type in West Hill Drive, our trusty West Hill Drive. And you can see that's populated now Aberdeenshire. Perfect. Well, one thing I forgot is to just go back and say, yeah, look, you're read only. Yeah. But again, choice is yours. You know, the next two I have on my list to pull from is total population, CY, and area. So I think these are going to be integers, which we can select from. Anyways, and I'm going to say that this is population 2021. I'm going to say that this is area total. And again, these names don't matter. It's whatever we put in the pull data function that matters, right? So we just need to make sure, we just need to make a note of this. If we need it, I'm going to say this is population 2021. I'm going to say this is total area square kilometers, right? Whatever it is. And that's fine. These are all going to be yeses. So I can choose from the drop down menu, or I can just write it in myself. And now what I can do is just copy that. Once I know it's working, I just test the pull data function once to make sure it's working. And then I say, okay, the total population field is this one here. I'm going to pull that from my Notion. And then the one for area is just area. And they're all read-only, and I say yes to read-only questions. I'm going to save this, converting the form, and let's go in West Hill Drive, our trusty West Hill Drive, and you can see there it's pulled up population 2021, total area. Now, if we go back and say, okay, so the first one here, Aldi, in my geolytics, retail points, West Hill Drive. I can see here in the county, it's actually Aberdeenshire as well, right? I have Aldi, perfect. And then my store name is Aldi West Hill. Now, if I go back into my postcode boundaries, and it's good enough, the total population was just over 500,000, and the area in square kilometers was just under 8,000. So if we say 508,492, 508,492, and my total area is 7865, and we just verify that, 7865. Now, of course, by changing this to a decimal, right, by changing this area question at the moment, it's just integers, which means there's no decimal places, but if I did want that, I could put that in as well. Just change it to a decimal. It's going to pull exactly what's there. But that is how to pull data from two separate feature layers. And, you know, if you're like me, you might have a question at the start, right? So, like, of course, we have, you know, a functioning pull data form. But, you know, there's a little bit more work needed in this, right, to make it as user-friendly as it can be. You know, you probably want to hide longitude, latitude, because you get it here anyways. You get it, you know, here, location of West Hill Drive. That's pre-populated from whatever they put in here. You know, tidy it up, put it into groups, stuff like that. We don't have time in this video to do that, you know, but what we can do if you ever need to do that is to just say, okay, well, look, type is going to be hidden on, say, latitude and longitude, you know, just to give you a head start if you ever need to tidy these things up. And what I actually want to go to is Esri field bind type, and just make sure that that's a double, which makes it a decimal, yeah? So if you are hiding fields, it's very important, right? So if we go into A and we say, hey, this is a hidden field, nobody's going to be able to see it, fine. But when we do publish it up, we do need to make sure that the field type actually corresponds to what we want it to be. Because we see here, we have decimals, we have text, which is string, and then we have integers as well. If we had dates in here that we're pulling from, that can get complicated very quickly, you know. So just make sure it's in column T, but these things change with updates as well. So just make sure bind Esri field type is always what you want it to be. If you're hidden, if these fields are hidden, right, in the survey form, and I'll show you what that looks like here, is that it'll still pre-populate the map. It'll still pre-populate everything. It'll still pull data correctly. If I type in West Hill Drive, it's just that the latitude and longitude has disappeared. But very important, just make sure that in the Esri field type that you're specifying what you want that field to be, whether it is because it will default to string or it just won't publish on you, right? So just bear that in mind. The other thing you might be asking yourself is like, hey, Adam, look, I mean, you know, what if my end user just types in West Hill Driv? Nothing's going to populate for them, yeah? So how do we kind of just tidy this up a little bit? And actually, just fun fact, while we're here, I mean, we can auto-complete these things as well, right? So in my pull data function, you can see this is a text, but actually if I want to make a drop down list from a feature layer, which is, this is a bonus tip at this stage, but I can put it in. I can say that this is going to be a list name called address, right? And I'm just going to use this, the same field name I want to look up, right? So all I've done is just created a list. I've given it a list name. You can call it whatever you want. It'll become important in a second, but the name and the label, I like to keep it as the same field name that we're going to search for, right? So very important, try and keep this the same field name. There are ways around it as well, but like just for this instance, the path of least resistance, just use the same field name, label, add one. Remember, that's what we're using the pull data function for here. Go into survey, type, select one, delete this list name, and replace it with your list name, whatever you call it. I called it address, yeah? And we're going to say, nice one. Select one from address. Now, if I just save that now, right, without using any pull data functions, right? And this isn't even a pull data function necessarily. This is an autocomplete search, but it ties in nicely with pull data functions to make it user friendly. You can see here I have one choice, add one. Okay, it's not tied to any feature layer yet. But if I go in here, so as opposed to going into the calculations, right, it's not necessarily a pull data like I said. I'm not doing any calculations, but what I am doing is if I go into appearance and I say autocomplete space search open brackets, open quotation marks, and I put in my list name, question mark, URL equals, and my URL is going to be whatever I have in this one here. So HTTPS, my geolytics points, yeah? No need to put any quotation marks around it until you're finished. Close brackets. And what did I just do? So I autocomplete space search, open up brackets, put in the name of my list, and realistically that could be anything, but just put it in. Like it could be project, it could be anything. It's not really necessary, but it does need something. Followed by a question mark, URL equals the exact REST URL endpoint of my feature layer, followed by closed quotation marks, close bracket, and save. And now what that allows me to do, because inevitably, I mean, we're talking about addresses in this data set. And if we have a look at addresses, even if we just like sort ascending on this, we're going to get a lot of the same ones. I presume there's going to be a lot of like, yeah, Bridge Street, Broad Street, two different ones. We might have, you know, Main Street, for instance, I presume is going to be a lot, you know. So in text fields, you know, that you're using to pull data from, and you don't have, you know, unique codes along each and every one, it could be a good idea to input this kind of autocomplete search. So for instance, if I type in Main Street now, it's going to create a lookup between my Survey123 form and the actual feature layer, and I'm going to be able to say, oh yeah, Main Street, oh yeah, it's 115 to 119, and now it's populated here. It said this is a co-op, the retailer is the cooperative group, its postcode district is Glasgow City, its population is this, its total area is this, and that works really nicely. If I type in West, it returns to me everything that has West. If I type in West Hill, or I haven't typed that in correctly, but I'm sure you get my point. I get West Road, for instance. Perfect. Type this in. west, whatever, yeah, I get options for it. And I can choose a drop-down menu, pull data functions. So that is it for today. Quite a long video, but I mean, these pull data functions has been something that really kind of wrecked my head for a long time before I actually dug into it. And you know, I think I spent a lot of time digging into it. I mean, this is a 50-minute video just on pulling data from 2 feature layers, but it does work, you know, and it is really invaluable and really powerful piece of kit. You know, once you're able to get your head around it and say, right, how is this URL constructed? How are these pull data functions constructed, you know? And then the easy part is just going in and saying, you know, how do I make this more user-friendly? Right, like I'm going to hide latitude, longitude, perfect. Realistically, you could hide the whole thing, bearing in mind that you're going to specify the Esri bind field type, right? But away you go. I mean, this, you know, we've pulled from 2 feature layers. Realistically, it doesn't have to stop there. You know, you can have as many feature layers pulling from multiple different sources as you can, you know, and then you can also have these cascading effects like we did today. You know, we've put in and said, here, look up this address, line 1, whatever, right? And if you get a hit on it, return the longitude and latitude and plot a point on a map for me. And maybe give me additional information like store name, retailer. Cool enough. But then we use that point from our geopoint question to say, hey, if we have that, well, get value at this point and tell me what postcode district name it intersects. Tell me the population of that postcode district and tell me the total area, right? So very powerful stuff once you get going. And I hope that helps. I hope you stuck with the whole way through. I know 50 minutes is a bit much, but complicated enough workflows require complicated enough videos, I hope. So look, if you want to reach out to me, you can always find me at adam@gisexpress.com. I have free newsletters that you can sign up for. I have free YouTube tutorials you can stay tuned for. I'm launching GIS Express workshops in September. It's essentially going to be everything I know about ArcGIS into one kind of single training resource. If you're interested in that, my website is gis-express.com, and that's going to include 1 live lesson per month and also then 1 pre-recorded lesson per month. And you know, I've often been asked, I suppose, since I started GIS Express, you know, what's the best way to do training? Is it live lessons? Is it pre-recorded self-paced learning? And my answer is always, it's both. Yeah, so if you can make use of both in this training resource, GIS Express workshops covers 2 different topics per month, and you get it straight in to your training library, and you also get unlimited Q&As as well, which is pretty slick, I think, all for the price of an ArcGIS Online creator, really. So look, if you're interested in that, gis-express.com. You find out more information about that. You can email me directly. Anything you want me to cover in like YouTube videos, anything you want more information about, happy to have a conversation. And if you're interested in the free resource as well, I have a newsletter, and the next one should be coming out in the next week or 2. But sure, look, hey, 53 minutes. I hope you got value out of it. I'm going to go drink some water now and chill out after so much talking. But I hope that has helped you. Pull data functions, really powerful, and hopefully that helps. Please let me know if it did.